So welcome everybody to our third episode of Macklin's Take this week. And we're going to put this one straight up on iTunes and on YouTube. So we're coming at you from two angles, a kind of pincer movement, audio and visual and video this week. You know, that's the brave new world of Macklin's Take these days. This one won't be quite as long as normal because we're just looking for a kind of a feel for the card, really, a couple of days out. It'll be Friday morning by the time this one is available. We're recording on Thursday evening, and we thought, having talked to Adam Booth on Tuesday's podcast and Fabio Wardley's on Thursday, that this would be a good opportunity to get into the bones of the card and look at the fights in detail. And joining us for this one is a man who fearlessly led the media cohort over to Gibraltar earlier in the week. It's new ground, really. I don't know anybody who's been over to Gibraltar to cover boxing before, but right in the vanguard of that noble cohort was a man who knows no fear, even though he has picked up a touch of sunburn over the last day or so. I have no sympathy because he's enjoying some good weather, and himself and Macklin are not. As we speak to him now, he is safely moored on what looks like a pretty luxurious boat, I have to say, in the marina in Gibraltar. It's making me rather jealous as I sit in my study in Forest Gate, deepest East London. It is, of course, the behemoth of boxing broadcasting, otherwise known as Barry Jones. Barry, I was going to ask you how you are, but you look well. You're in august surroundings.
I'm having a great time. Hang on, sorry. Yeah, just leave the caveat on the side. Thanks. Yep. Okay, thank you. Thanks. Yeah. It's great. It's fantastic. I'm having a time of my life. It's pretty special. I didn't really have big expectations for Gibraltar. I don't know why, but it's beautiful. It really is. And the boat, the dinghy we're on, which is probably no way would you describe it that way. It's huge, and it's pure luxury. It really is. And we've been around today because obviously it's still in the bubble, still going to stay on the boat at all times, which is a pity because you've got nowhere to go. There's only 7 decks, so it's a bit boring, really.
Yeah, my heart bleeds. So what have you been up to the last couple of days? Then, what was it? Workouts last night, press conferences today. What have you? What intel have you got? What have you seen?
Well, they got the workouts on. They got a little mini ring on the top deck, and so they had a few little workouts there. We did some interviews with some of the guys. They all look nice and relaxed, and again, because of the atmosphere and because of the sun, and everyone just looks really confident. I know sometimes you get some kids who, even like Chris Congo, who's not the most outspoken or outspoken. He's full of beans. You know, he really is, and I just think the sun and just the setting of it all has made everyone really confident. So it's been good to see. And today, the press conference today was at the Botanical Gardens, which was phenomenal. So you go halfway up, slightly up a mountain, not quite, but on the way up towards it. And then it was just a fantastic setting. It's beautiful, just really is. And so the boxing's just going to get in the way of my holiday. That's where it is at the minute.
that can be the way. So basically, you started off. You all met, didn't you, at the Hilton by the SSC Arena, which is where the bubbles have been for the home show. So the bubble in the Hilton has been transplanted to the boat in Gibraltar. Essentially, is what has happened, I guess. Yeah,
so you have to do the 24 hours in the hotel. It was really stressful, but you just sat in bed all day doing nothing. But then, you guys, of course, no more than I. And then we caught a coach to Stansted. We all got on chartered flights, loads of us, all been tested, of course. And we were all Matchroom Air, which and then it's only a short flight. And you get off Gibraltar, and you literally, actually, the runway is literally it's one of the shortest runways in the world. So it's quite frightening to come in. And you have to stop the traffic because part of that runway is the road. Like you over the railway line, put on the barriers. That's what they have here for the landing strip for the airways, so the airplane. So it was a little bit weird, and because literally if you don't get it right, you're skirting across the sea. So a little bit surreal.
Matt, it's
and Povetkin's been so chilled, like crazily chilled, just almost like he doesn't really care. But that's just the experience, his demeanour. And Dillian looks full of beans and full of confidence, and so I think we'll expect both think they can win, and rightly so, because one did win and one was winning before he got beat. But yeah, I think it's going to be a good fight again, actually.
So let's get into the card, because there are some other really interesting fights on that card as well.
First of all, Andy, I've got to put in, Barry's talking about caviar there. I said, never mind the caviar. You just want to get some Ambre Solaire. Because if you get any more vitamin D on that head, you'll have sunstroke.
Well, the funny thing, I was saying to the guys earlier, they're going, because it's not boiling, it's just warm, but you're still out in the sun, and you're direct sun. And I mean, I haven't had direct sunlight for ages, it feels like. So I said, yeah, I don't burn. And usually I don't if I'm half sensible. But I said, I do, sometimes I've been to Dubai and places, and after you can stick your finger in your head and leave a big dent. And I'm not quite like that. And I don't think it's as bad. But I phoned down, because we stuck on the boat, I phoned down to reception, do they sell sun cream? And they said no. So I'm like, well, I'm not. No, I have got a little bit of a burnt head. I got to stay in pretty much. So it's, yes. I'm having a hard time with it. Like I envy you guys that at the minute, like, you know what I mean. I'd rather come out a few days later, to be honest, and just cut the back end of it. But there you go. Such is life. I'm an early bird now, because I'm a multitasker, as we all know now. So I'm out early doing other jobs and nicking everyone's work.
Right. As I was saying, let's get into the card, because it is a really interesting one. The top of the bill, particularly, we saw what happened in August at Maskell's with that chilling one-punch knockout from Povetkin, and an incredibly well delivered shot that somebody of his skill level is still very much capable of. I was having a brief exchange on WhatsApp with Matt Christie about this earlier today, and I was saying that I didn't think it would necessarily be a classic. I think it's a must-win for Dillian Whyte. We talked about this before, Matt, in kind of the same way that it was for Anthony Joshua against Andy Ruiz. He's just got to get this one over the line. It doesn't really matter how he does it. And Matt was kind of agreeing with me, but he said, but there's always that feeling in the back of your mind that what happened in August could happen again.
I mean, I spoke to a guy earlier, and he follows the boxing quite a lot, a friend of mine, and he was just asking me, the fights this weekend, what do you reckon? I said, no. I said, look, I think Dillian will win. I think he's just got to do what he did last time and just maintain it and be consistent, and just can't afford to switch off at all, because Povetkin carries genuine one-punch power, which he proved that he's got the power to take him out with one shot. So I said, I don't think he will. But, of course, you never know. It's heavyweight boxing, and it could happen. But I said, I don't think so. If I was, putting money on it, I'd put Dillian to probably win by stoppage in the late rounds. I think he'll do what he did. He'll just be a bit more patient, and rather than going for it in the mid rounds, I think he'll just keep it long, keep softening him up, stay tight defensively, and break him down. I've done a piece on Sky Sports News on Monday, and I spoke with Dillian on like a satellite feed. And I was cracking the jokes when he was on about the yacht. I said, "Oh, you've gone all Conor McGregor," but it went down like a lead balloon. he didn't like the joke at all. So I just thought he's very, he's probably a bit hypersensitive. He's very switched on, very focused, and he just doesn't want to. He's not in the mood to be joking. You know what I mean? He's very sort of, tunnel vision.
How's he seem to you, Barry, Dillian?
Yeah, I think that he was quite, to be fair, he was quite good in the press conference, but he's ready now. I think I think he's quite, in many ways, he's quite an honest fella about his career and about how he fights. He just, I want to have a fight, and I think that's why the loss might not affect him as much as it would some other people, because he's talking as if, and if he believes it, then it's a good thing. That I'm in a fight and I go for it, and if I get caught, I get caught. That's fine. That this happens. It's a good way to see it if he truly believes it, and I'm hoping that he does. Because otherwise, that's a that's a thing to have stuck in your head. That because you'll replay that over in your head time and time again. And any doubts appear there's something right, or no, that terrible knockout is still in your head. It'll appear it's the night before the fight. When you go to bed the night before the fight, your brain is spinning of all different things that can happen, positive things mainly about how you're going to win and what you're going to do after you win and how you're going to celebrate. But also, if you things haven't been spot on for you, or there's something hanging over you like that, obviously that knockout that could surface. It might not with him, but there's always that possibility of that happening. But he looks relaxed and he looks like he wants to go. But what Matt was saying about how he should approach the fight, which I totally agree with, I don't think he's going to do that. I think he should keep it long and soften him up and go for it. But I think him and his whole team just believe that they had him, and they think they let him off the hook. And so I think they're going to go harder and faster, quicker, which might end in a fantastic result. They probably will, but it also brings Povetkin close. And it gives him the opportunity to hit you. I don't say it's naive, because if it works, it's a good move. But I just don't see for the life of me why you someone like him who's shown you, not just you've seen on tape, you've physically felt it, what he can do when he's close. Now Povetkin, Whyte, sorry, likes to be close. Matt mentioned before the fight, and has plenty of times before, and I've nicked it off him. He blocks and counters with the same hand, and he obviously got definitely one of the knockdowns, maybe two of them with that. So he goes Dillian because he likes to do that, but not against this guy. You know, and one time you stand up straight, you have a punch or whatever. Once he dips over that front knee, when he ages down like that, he's coming up with something that can hurt you.
There is a lot of pressure on Dillian Whyte, because that defeat last August, that's seen him slip down to number 6 with the WBC. If he gets the win, then there's talk that he might be put in a final eliminator. That's a possibility against Deontay Wilder, who's at 1 with the WBC. Who knows how something like that could play out? But what we do know is that if he loses again, then what does he do then? I mean, that would be I hesitate to use the word fatal. It sounds a bit overly dramatic, but having come as far as he's come and been as patient as he's been and been as bold and as calculated in the risks that he's taken, if he loses on Saturday, I just don't know what he does.
I mean, you never want to be absolute about a loss. I mean, Marco Antonio Barrera got knocked out by Junior Jones years ago. Then he lost on points in the rematch. So 2 back-to-back losses to the same guy. Yet most of what Barrera achieved in his career was after that. So it's not absolute, but look, it'd be a sickener. You know, it really would be a sickener, and he certainly would be a rebuild job then. You know what I mean? Look, I think the worst thing that can happen to someone, or the biggest fear that might happen when someone loses, and especially the way he lost that with that knockout, is that they come back, they're gun shy. Now, I don't think he will be, listening to him talk, because he seems like, as Barry said, quite a matter-of-fact, honest guy. So he's accepted what happened and why it happened. On the other hand, compare that to someone like Deontay Wilder, who's blaming it on everything he can possibly think of. That means that guy's in denial about what's happened. And if you're in denial about what happened, how can you improve on it or come past it? But Dillian, that weren't the case with Dillian. He's just like, you know what? I got caught with a great shot. That's it. And he's back to it. That said, I think the fact that the fight's been put back a few times, it will probably be a blessing. They brought in Harold Knight. It's another person in the camp. You have to get to know each other. So I actually think that has probably been a blessing in disguise, that it didn't go ahead in November as originally planned. But look, these are all ifs, buts, and maybes, and we're predicting, and there's answers we don't know until the bell goes. But I think when the closer it's getting now, I think the bigger the anticipation's building. Certainly, the more excited I'm getting.
But Barry, like you said earlier, you know, Povetkin's kind of wandering around like he doesn't have a care in the world, and by comparison, he kind of doesn't. You know, he's towards the end of his career. He's probably achieved what he would like to have achieved. If it was all to end after Saturday, he can look back at an enormously successful career. Yes, he would want another world title fight. Of course he would. But but there's just so much more pressure on one fighter than the other, and it's Dillian Whyte.
Yeah, I think all the pressure's on him because everything's built around him. He was a big favourite going into the first fight. And I think rightly so, because Povetkin he's still slower than he once was. But yeah, I think you're spot on. Povetkin's done it once, why can't he do it again? And he's at the tail end of his career where if it's a bad loss, he retires, being a world champion, and he's achieved his ambitions, you would have thought. So yeah, it is all on Whyte because again, as you already mentioned, he was so close to getting that world title shot. Could have avoided Povetkin, could have gone another easier route. But did the thing that we all admired him for, but it backfired. But and it's hopefully for him and his team that they make that right on Saturday.
Absolutely. So let's shift focus to what I would say is the second best fight on the card, which is the vacant British super welterweight title on the line between Ted Cheeseman and James Metcalf. And what's very convenient really here is that we've both seen a lot of we've all seen plenty of Cheeseman. Me and Matt have been ringside for most of Cheeseman's fights, but you've seen a lot of Metcalf, Barry, too. We've only really seen Metcalf on the TV, at least I have anyway. So it'll be very interesting to hear your side of this. This is a really, really good fight. I mean, it almost happened a while ago because they were put in the final eliminator against each other. At that point, they were both undefeated. And both camps, I think, rightly decided at that point that it was too big a fight, really, for a final eliminator, that the reward of them boxing just wasn't there at that point. So that didn't happen. But now there's a vacant British title on the line. Cheeseman's already held it once. He desperately wants to get it back. Metcalf's Commonwealth champion. That's not being contested on Saturday for whatever reason. It's just a great matchup. What I want to know, Barry, basically is we've seen Cheeseman generally get on the front foot and be aggressive, but against Scott Fitzgerald, we saw a kind of another side to him. What about Metcalf? Can he do it the one way, or could he do it a variety of ways?
I'm sorry, because you sort of brought up Metcalf. Can he do it a variety of ways?
Yeah,
you are. Yeah, I think he can. I think he's used more of his. He's got better. I think he got better footwork, better legs than Cheeseman, and so he boxes more. Because he looks so much like his dad, you tend to think he's going to box the same way as Shane Neary and go right at you. And I think he got that, but he does box. He does box quite well, and I think so. I think that's what he'll need to do. And if he does that, that will make Cheeseman be the aggressor. Though I think Cheeseman's trying to box more. I think certainly after the Garcia fight, where walking forward in straight lines sort of made him, question himself, if many things, about the way he was going throughout his career. But he always got that, like, a tough it out in his back pocket. And that's usually how he ends up having to do it anyway. But at least he tried to box. But I don't know if him trying to outbox Metcalf would be the right choice in this scenario. I think he has to drag him into a war. Now, Metcalf can have a war with it as well. He's a tough guy, but I'm not sure if he's as tough as Cheeseman. But then, even though Cheeseman is young, and we all say it, all those wars, they must take something out of you. I don't mean dramatically, but and he might be fine, because you do learn from fights, even hard fights. But how much can you keep going, jumping in against the wall all the time before, in the end, it's not quite there?
Matt, that's something we were talking about the other day, is that you look at Cheeseman's last 4 fights, he had that 12-round shellacking off Garcia, really. And then he had a draw with Kieran Conway, so another distance fight, which was tough fight. Distance fight against Scott Fitzgerald, same thing, hard fight. And then a really hard fight against Sam Eggington. It's kind of, it sounds like a crazy thing to say, as Barry said, given that he's 25 now, I think. But is he already kind of on that cusp of, is he seasoned or a bit shop worn? It's kind of hard to say.
Yeah, and sometimes that can be a very fine line, the difference in those two. Look, it's another hard fight, isn't it? Like, whatever happens, this is going to be a hard fight, because I don't see him blasting Metcalf out of there. Funnily enough, listening to Barry talk there, and Barry's seen more of Metcalf than I have, but what I have seen of Metcalf, I was going to say, I think Metcalf is the one that's going to try and make a war out of it, and he'll try and drag Cheeseman in. And actually, I think that it would be a mistake for Cheeseman to stand and fight with Metcalf, because I don't know this for a fact, but it's only what my gut feeling. But I thought that Metcalf's like his intensity. I think he's fresher when it comes to the battle, and I think if it goes like if it's gung ho ding dong right from the first round, I don't know if Cheeseman can go there again. After having so many back-to-back hard fights, does it go to the well again? I don't know. I would have thought that Cheeseman will look to come out, or should come out, and box the first 6 rounds like he did against Fitzgerald. Try and take something out. Try and take the sting out of Metcalf before you stand and trade. I think inevitably, at some point, that's going to happen. Do you know what I mean? But I think if Cheeseman can try and bag a few of the early rounds without exerting too much energy or too much, wear and tear, if he can soften Metcalf up behind the jab, because he can box Cheeseman. He proved that against Fitzgerald. He showed he can do it, and he can move, box on the outside, keep offsetting, feinting, and changing angles. If he can do that, bag a few rounds and soften Metcalf up, I think that would be sensible. From what I've seen of Metcalf, I've seen him train in the gym a few times, and everything was, intense. It was 100 miles an hour. He was loading up on shots, and to do that for 12 rounds, it's hard going. But but it's interesting because Barry obviously has seen more of him, and he sees it the other way. So I don't know. It'll be interesting, but I think whatever happens, this is going to probably, outside of the main event, this is the fight I'm looking most forward to.
I've sort of seen it as like the results of the fight ending up the same sort of way there. That after sort of 4 or 5 rounds, one of them certainly, I think they're both going to try to be quite smart, but I just think because of the movement of Metcalf, he got better legs, and I think he got faster reflexes, and he's a little bit fresher. Of course, he's 7 years older. That Cheeseman if Cheeseman misses a few times, he'll just go and revert back to type like you always do. But he's trying to box more now and I think that they realise for longevity to be a little bit smarter, and that's right, and he's looked a little bit better for doing that. But I think ultimately, he'll be the one who pulls the trigger first. Because, again, like you said, the output of Metcalf, but he can do it on the move. And I don't mean on the move like I was, dancing around, like, running away. But he's always on the bounce and the steps, and he can get it on a target really quick. And I think that might make Cheeseman go for it. But I think you're right. After 4, 5, 6, 3, whatever it is, there's going to be a point there that fight just explodes, and then the rest of the fight is just a war of attrition.
Yeah, as soon as it was proposed by the board, and Matchroom and Queensberry got together and made it happen, and Matchroom won the purse bids for that one, obviously, just been looking forward to it. There's another one of them coming up before too long, actually, Denzel Bentley against Felix Cash. Other way around with that one, because Queensberry have won the bids for that, but it's just, there's no good reason why these fights can't happen.
What, Andy? If it does come a war of attrition quite quickly, I think I'd favour Metcalf just because he's fresher. When it comes down to a blood and guts, absolute emptying the tank, going to the well, there's a lot to be said for having a bit of freshness. It's good to have been there and be battle hardened, toughened and hardened to it. But when you've gone there 4 or 5 fights back to back, I don't know. I'd favour Metcalf if it ends up like going like that.
The only solace for Cheeseman in that scenario is, I know you don't know what you're going to react to. You're in that scenario, whatever it is, when you've been really hurt or put down, or forced in round 9 when you're blown out your backside, and you got you think, even if you're winning, you've been in that scenario, and so have I, and somebody pushes you through. But some fighters can't push through, whether it's their desire, mentally, physically, whatever it is. And so I'm sure Metcalf can, but I guess Cheeseman, and he sort of said the day of the press conference, he hasn't been there yet. So he's sort of not questioning his heart, but he's saying he doesn't know if he can do it. But I know I can do it. So, but as you say, Matt, I think I agree that he knows he can do it. But one day he can go to do it, and it won't be there, and that's where the problem was. But again, all the unknowns. Has Metcalf got the fire? Can he dig deep? Because he hasn't been seen yet. And could Cheeseman still dig deep because he's done it so many times?
That's it. That's the perfect summary, really. That's...
I literally just took what Matt said and made it my own, pretty much.
Well, this is what that's the job. I try and explain this to people sometimes. You've got to be a chameleon. You need a bone collector, a magpie. You've got to collect all these things, save it for a rainy day, and then when it's at its optimum, when it's at its peak usefulness, wheel it out. Yes, by all means, put your own stamp all over it. Another fight that I'm looking forward to, that I like, is Chris Congo against Michael McKinson, and that might not have caught too many people's eye, but the reason I like it is because it's kind of almost fate, if you like, that these two ended up fighting each other, because not that long ago they were calling everybody out, everybody they could think of, because they were both in the same boat. They both felt that they were good but avoided fighters because they really didn't bring very much to the table. We've seen Congo a fair bit. Barry, you'll have seen McKinson more than we have. And there was something in that for the pair of them. Then Chris Congo got signed by Whyte, and we saw him in fight camp. And then this fight got made. And you would imagine that this will be a technical fight. You would imagine that that's the way that this one will go. But it is good to see McKinson get an outing on a really big card, because you look at the ranking he's got with the WBO and you look at the 19 fights and 19 wins. I think he deserves it.
Yeah, I think fighting to watch because of his style, but he's exceptionally. So I would say he's like Joe. He doesn't box like Joe Kazagi. I'm not saying he's going to be as good as Joe Kazagi, but he's like Joe in his early career, not in his early, some of his title reigns. He's not always really good to watch, but he's really hard to beat. And that's his strength, that he's so slippery and tricky that he gives everyone a problem. He's caused himself the problem, and that's the reason why he can give everyone a problem, because of his style. He's a southpaw. He moves in unorthodox angles. He sort of bends over and pivots on the front foot, and he's very hard to hit. But also in Chris Congo, you've got someone who this is the one where it won't be the fight of the night, but it's a really hard one to pick a winner, I feel.
Yeah, I think the same. I mean, I've seen Chris Congo a couple of times. McKinson, I've only seen clips, but I don't know if it's going to be a fight of the year candidate, but I think it's going to be a hard fought, tricky kind of boxing match.
Yeah, I think definitely. I think it's Congo at the faster pace. Just really happy with, of course, and he will be behind the jab. McKinson will take that jab away, and he'll land. And I think with McKinson, he's not a big hitter, but he hits enough for you to feel it. Just sometimes he just doesn't know when to hold his feet in the right. So he's still, even though he's had 19 fights, he's still in that learning stage where he's just got to get the balance right between holding the feet to land, but staying elusive enough to make a miss. I sort of fancy McKinson, and I like Congo, and he deserves his chance. And like you said, Matt, and at the start, the two kids who were begging for a big fight, but this is their opportunity now. But unfortunately, it's against each other. Two kids, they haven't got the big name they want, but the big name will be next. And so, but I do think McKinson might be just tricky enough to get over the line in an interesting fight, but not, as Matt said, not a fight of the year by any stretch of the imagination. Yeah,
most likely. Most likely that's the kind of thing that we will see.
Sorry, again, I just said what Matt said and made it my own.
Congo was good. Congo was good during fight camp against Luther Clay. Luther Clay's a completely different kind of fighter to McKinson. But what was good about Congo that night was that he'd said in the build up to the fight, look, I know that maybe I need to be a bit better to watch. I've kind of learned that now, that this is the pro game, and that matters. And he did that. He put his foot down when he felt he needed to, and he got the stoppage, and he does seem to be bursting with confidence, and he's been working with Josh Taylor. He's worked with Josh Taylor for about 4 or 5 years, but in the build up to this fight, he's been getting his southpaw sparring, which is what he needs from Josh Taylor. So that's a pretty good recommendation. Let's just skip on to the chief support, which is Fabio Wardley against Eric Molina. And what I'm dying to know, Barry, is what kind of shape does Molina look to be in?
He looks all right, to be fair. Look, for a heavyweight, it's not get carried away. Then he's not cut. You know, he hasn't got a six-pack like I have. But sorry, I thought it was 1988. Sorry. No, he looks in good shape. To be fair, he really does, and full of confidence, and so he should. He got to be thinking this is a gift for him because he's boxed at a high level, like a really high level. And Wardley's had 10 fights and no amateur experience. Even though he's seen Wardley, he must be thinking he's doing that against people who are no good. But Wardley, I like Wardley. I like his style. I think Larty was meant to be a test of sorts, but it turned out not to be a test. And you have to give all credit to Wardley for that. He took it away. But this is a bigger test because even though I got no doubt that he can put Molina on the back foot and he can put him up against the ropes, but you can't stand in front. If Molina takes this fight from Molina, this is not a fight that he's going to think he's full of confidence, but it's a fight that gets his name back in the conversation of other fights. So he looks trim and he looks in condition and he looks full of confidence. But Wardley's a lovely talker. So you got a good-looking kid. He got a lovely style, nice fast hands, very good footwork. But he hasn't been caught. He hasn't been dragged into a war yet. He hasn't been hit with anything really note. So there's those question marks that are still around him.
Matt, what's really interesting about this is that this is one of those fights where nobody's saying this week, or I've not really heard too many people say this week, anyone actually, that this is definitely too much too soon for Fabio. Nobody's saying that, despite the fact that when you look at their CVs, there's this absolute gaping chasm in terms of experience and the level they've been at. And the reason they're not saying it is because we saw him in Saudi Arabia, albeit against a very good fighter in Filip Hrgović, and it didn't last very long. And quite frankly, he didn't look all that interested, and he hasn't boxed since. So at the minute, people regard this as being a really clever piece of matchmaking. But you can guarantee if Fabio Wardley gets beat by Eric Molina, all of a sudden, this will be a terrible piece of matchmaking. And he was always going to be far too experienced. And what were they thinking?
Look, he's a former world champion and he's absolutely way too experienced, at his best for someone like Fabio Wardley, who's got, no amateur background. He's only had 10 professional fights, but he has done a lot of rounds of sparring with a lot of really good fighters. He's been in camp with Usyk a couple of times. He's Hrgović. He sparred these guys, Dillian. So, it's not like he's just beaten a few well-matched guys. He's been in the gym. Okay, it's sparring. But I'd imagine he's been sparring hard and they've been impressed by him. They've had him back, And if we look at Molina, if we're honest, it comes down to ambition, hunger. Does he really want it anymore? Didn't really look that way in Saudi. Yes, Hrgović, he hits hard and he's a good fighter. So any ambition he did have, he knocked it out of him early doors. Can Fabio do the same? I think he probably can. I think Molina's ambition isn't there. The hunger's not there. I think he might have a go first couple of rounds. I think, this young pretender hasn't been anywhere near my level. But I think Wardley's better than what we think just because he came to white collar, just because he doesn't have the amateur pedigree. I think he has learned a lot and he has done a lot of rounds in sparring with some really good fighters. So, and I think he's hungry and he's ambitious and he wants it. So even if Molina sticks it on him a bit, I don't think Wardley will just fold. Do you know what I mean? I think he's a tough enough kid, and I think he'll weather the early storm if there is one. And I think he'll be too fresh, too hungry, too fast, and yeah, I fancy Wardley to get the job done.
So there's another interesting heavyweight fight, which maybe Barry, you've got some intel. I can't quite work out how this has happened, this fight between Nick Webb and Eric Pfeiffer. And I'm not sort of disparaging the fight in that regard. Webb's proven at a certain level. He had the defeat against David Allen, then another one against Kamil Sokolowski. It was difficult to see where he'd go from there. But then after taking a year out, one Ultimate Boxer. Eric Pfeiffer is a two-time Olympian, two-time World Championship bronze medalist. I saw his last fight actually. I was over there in Germany, November 2019, and saw that when he won the WBO European. I've absolutely no idea how these two have ended up in the ring together. But this is a tall order for Nick Webb, I would say.
It seems that way, but but for Nick Webb, it's a case of if he doesn't win, and you wouldn't put much money on it, to be honest, but if he doesn't win, then this is his role unless he retires, because he's just going to be the guy who a prospect comes over, a prospect at like 9-0, 5-0, 10-0. He's the guy that they fight. And that's going to be and that's how he's going to make his living. So he knows for him this is the win that he needs. It's funny, see, because Nick Webb, when he got stopped by Dave Allen, he was winning the fight, of course, and he got caught with a good shot. And the Solowski, or whatever his name is, that fella. Matt never said it first. I can't say it. So that fella, again, even though he's a journeyman as such, he could still bang a bit. And I think from the Allen fight, his confidence was shot, and then they had to rebuild to that Ultimate Boxer, which is not great quality, but it's still an interesting and it's on a big platform, so it gives you a bit of a step up. And I think he got his confidence back. Do he was in one of the best amateur fights I've seen, Nick Webb. He boxed Joe Joyce in Feltham Leisure Centre in southwest London, in the northwest divs, like the quarterfinals or something, and they went toe to toe for 3 rounds.
It's the stuff of legend. It's the stuff of legend, that fight, isn't it? I saw John Dennon tweeting about it the other day.
It was unbelievable. It was just like, because like Nick Webb was massively out of shape. He was fat. He was, and he'll know that. He was fat, and Joe Joyce was this muscle, and you thought, "Oh, this is going to last as long as I can scrap." And then it was just unbelievable. Joe Joyce was hit, but when I thought he'd be had to hurt, but we'll see. But yeah, you got with Pfeiffer because he's looked good. You got that pedigree as an amateur. He hasn't looked sensational as a pro, but he's looked solid, and he keeps his shape. Might just be enough.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It is an interesting one, certainly. So let's just finish off with a good old Hatton chat, because there is another fight on Facebook. Kane Baker up against Yusuf Kamari. Yusuf is a new addition to Team Whyte, and that's a good fight actually, because they both operated at a similar kind of level. Kamari's drawn for an English title. Kane Baker has lost but put up a good display for an English title, and that should be a good opener. That's on the Facebook coverage. Campbell Hatton makes his professional debut, trained by Uncle Matthew and managed by his dad Ricky. And just seeing the kind of pieces of footage over the last few days of the Hattons in situ around fight week. Matchroom put out this great little doc called Blue Moon Rising, which kind of gets the hairs standing up on the back of your neck when you're watching some of it. And it's, I mean, firstly, it makes you feel really fucking old, because we all remember Ricky when he was at his peak, and for Campbell to be 20 years old already. Although Ricky's a granddad now, because Campbell had a kid when he was 17 a couple of years ago. Ricky was a granddad at the age of 39. So it's great fun, and the build-up's been entertaining. He's in with a fighter who's 0-10, so they're not taking any chances with him. It's just the start of what should be a fun journey, and hopefully a rewarding one for Hatton Jr. We've got no idea how good he might be, as you generally haven't at this stage of a career, but maybe particularly in his case, because, I mean, we just haven't seen him.
No, and I think, I remember, God, it does make me feel old, because I remember Campbell when he was a child, coming into the gym in Manchester, Billy Graham's, and Yeah, God, it's just mad where those years have gone. But I think with Campbell Hatton, we could see something like, I remember Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. turning pro, and early doors, he didn't really, there was big expectations. Obviously, people are always going to compare him to his old man, who, Julio Cesar Chavez, maybe the best Mexican fighter ever, is in that conversation, and, Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. had this spotlight on him, but he came along slowly to start with, but he did end up developing into a good fighter. Okay, not the fighter of his old man, and obviously, he's had a lot of stick in these last few years. He's just blown up in weight, hasn't lived the life, and all the rest of it. But he had some good performances. He beat Andy Lee. You know what I mean? Andy Lee's a top fighter. Chavez beat him. He had some other good wins as well. Listen, he lost to Sergio Martinez and lost 11 and a half of those rounds. But the last minute of that fight, and I boxed on the card and knocked out Alcine on the undercard of that. And so I literally just got ringside for that fight. And Sergio had put on an absolute boxing masterclass. But the last minute of that, last 30 seconds, last minute of that last round was probably the most excited I've ever, in terms of atmosphere, the anticipation. I was in the Thomas and Mack, and when I say every single person was on their feet for the last 30 seconds of that fight, every single person was on their feet. It was like it's like you're watching a car crash. It's about to happen. He's going to get done. He's going to get done. He's just boxed unbelievable for 11 and a half rounds, and he's going to get done. And, he stayed in. But I think that was the end of Sergio. But, Campbell Hatton, he's gonna find his own feet. You know what I mean? He's got big, his old man there what a fighter. But Ricky Hatton was a fantastic amateur. Yeah, he turned pro young, but he was senior ABA champion at 18. He'd won every title you could win as a junior. He'd boxed for young England schoolboys. He'd boxed senior for England. So you know what I mean? He was experienced. He'd been training with the pros since he was 16 anyway. So he was ahead of himself. He was years ahead of himself when he did turn pro. He was ready and he was made for the pro game. I don't know where Campbell is in that sense, but I think, the little clips I've seen, he's probably more suited to the pros than the amateurs. But I think it'll be, a much slower building job than what it was with Ricky.
The spotlight on him, Barry, is what it was always going to be. We've seen it in recent years with Eubank Jr. And we've seen it with Conor Benn, but it's probably even more intense for Campbell Hatton, just because Ricky is more recent and legends though Ben and Eubank are, that proximity and Hatton being, it's just a massive name in the boxing world.
They've been playing it down over here. No, Ricky has certainly, and rightly so. He realises that it's pressure enough having the Hatton name, but people constantly talking about it is only going to put more pressure on Campbell and make him feel the pressure. So he's trying to do what a good manager would do, which is, and also what a good father would do, and take that pressure away. But it's still going to be there, and not so much the pressure of having to perform. It's well, it is to perform really. It's whatever you do, you're going to be compared to Ricky, and not Ricky when he turned pro, the Ricky at his peak. That's the issue. They're going to go, not as good as your dad. And you're going to go, well, you never see my dad's professional debut. You don't know how good he was back at the very beginning. So, I think it's that. But he sounds like a real level. Remember, this is a rich kid. We forget this. He was born into wealth. He never wanted for anything a day in his life. But he doesn't act, sound, or feel like that. So, and that's good. I mean, it's good. Looks like you got a hunger. Like the hunger for us, Matthew, most of us, was, there was nothing else to do, or you want to get out of poverty or whatever it was. But for him, the world was relatively his oyster because his dad couldn't put him anywhere with the finances that he has. But he's chosen the sport, and talking. It's a good thing that Matthews. I like that Matthews in his corner, not Ricky, because that would be an added pressure even more so. The fact that Matt's taking the lead, and Matt's probably got a better overall knowledge of boxing because he was a good boxer, Matthew, a very good boxer. He had the Hatton curse the other way. He was overlooked because his brother was so good, so he sort of had to do a lot of his work in the shadows in many ways. but he sort of, his all-round game was honed quite well. I think Matthew was massively underrated. So I think the fact that he boxes more will help Campbell. It's going to be an interesting, like Connor's Ben's journey. It's going to be really interesting. And if he can get to the level that Connor's at now, or certainly beyond that, it'll be quite phenomenal. I think Ricky's, like, I don't follow too many other sports, basketball, but no one plays basketball in this country really. But except for myself, who was in the Wetherwell squad when I was 13.
I didn't know that.
Midget basketball, it was called. And
what I was going to say.
Yeah, it was actually, and the basketball was about this big. It was ridiculous. But anyway, Ricky might be the very last working class hero we've had in sports. I sort of feel that way because, you know, now the kids, they turn pro, but they go from these academies. You don't see them. Footballers, they're in the they're taking a 12. You don't see them again. You know, they become stars of, you know, they're like untouchable people. But boxing is very community based, and so, but because most of the kids who are making it now are from that GB squad, they haven't had that interaction with their community as, say, we had. Me, Matthew, and certainly Ricky took a community and took it around the world with him. And then that community took the community from outside, and then he became a national treasure because of that. And he might be the last one who's done that, I think, from that platform. See, Joshua, you know, turned pro, and everyone loves Joshua, and Fury maybe, but in a different way. But yeah, I think Hatton was a bit unique, and maybe the last one we've had.
Yeah, I do. I think it's massively important that fighters make it who don't have that GB background and who don't sign with a massive promoter off the bat and manage to somehow come through. Josh Warrington's done a similar thing, hasn't he? And you know,
sorry, yeah, but not at the scale. Even though Josh is a great fighter, a fantastic fighter, and you know, but he didn't get there. He hasn't quite. Leeds, he's a god, and only a sellout, he can sell out a stadium, for God's sake. What am I talking about? But Ricky was different. It was different, and you must know this. Matthew should talk about this, because what do I know? I was well. Actually, I'm better to speak about it than Matthew, because Matthew was in it. Where I'm talking from outside, from Cardiff. I've retired for years, but even I was like, wow, this is Ricky Hatton. You know, just the atmosphere and just watching on telly, and you know, it was just and that Floyd Mayweather thing. I was doing courses in school for kids who were troubled kids in school, misbehaved kids in school at the time, and we were all singing "There's Only One Ricky Hatton." We did an assembly, a boxing display in assembly, and it was Christmas time, just before Christmas, wasn't it? And they all started singing "There's Only One Ricky Hatton." I got a whole year 60 suspended.
No, I mean, they're amazing days. They're absolutely amazing days, and we did a real close look at that fight with Mike Costello, the Hatton Mayweather fight, and Barry's right, Matt. You were in the middle of it, but it was phenomenal. I mean, people use that word a lot, but it was phenomenal.
I'm just going to put my trousers on, okay? So
yeah, go for it.
It's dinner time.
That whole period of time, you know, when I turned pro, Ricky Hatton was flying, and you know, he was 4 years older than me. So he was someone that I'd followed even in the amateurs. I remember seeing him in the junior ABA semi-finals in York Hall, and everyone was talking about him that day. I'd never seen him box. He was a standout guy who stopped someone in the first round. Then we seen him in the junior ABA final. Same thing, stopped the guy in the first round. So when he won the ABAs, when he turned pro, I was already very much following Ricky Hatton as a fan. Do you know what I mean? So when I went up to Manchester, then, you know, I turned pro. I was with Frank Warren. I boxed on lots of his undercards, you know, became a gym mate, sparring partner, drinking partner, was, you know, in his corner when he fought Floyd Mayweather and Castillo, was in the house with them. So, you know, became great friends. And that whole period for me, and I think that whole period for everyone in British boxing at that time, it was a special time. You know, he had this unbelievable fan base. He had a great personality. Do you know what I mean? He was very, very funny, very witty, very personable, and an unbelievably exciting style to watch. And you know, he fought some great fighters. You know, Hall of Famers, Costa Sioux, Floyd Mayweather. You know, Manny Pacquiao. You know, Castillo, Malignaggi. You know, he really had a phenomenal career, and he brought an atmosphere that I don't know. I don't think we've seen it since. Even though Joshua was banging out Wembley Stadium, I think it was a different atmosphere, the Hatton fights.
Yeah, I agree. It was different. And I do think that he'll become more and more of a British boxing treasure as he gets older and his career becomes a bit further removed, because he was a very, very good fighter.
Sorry, Andy. Sorry to interrupt you. Has my head got browner as we've been talking?
It looks like it might have done, yeah. I think
Yeah,
it's
you must have had the after sun on.
No, they don't sell any. It's amazing, isn't it? Look at this. Look, I'm like a walking miracle.
Well, for people listening to the audio version of this, Barry's head at the start of the podcast, due to there being a lack of sun cream in Gibraltar, as he described, was kind of glowing red, radioactive looking, and now it's this kind of like noble mahogany color. He's just put on his strides, just pulled on his trousers to a head down.
That's the Arab in me. That's the Arab in me. See,
I don't think Barry was one for fake tan.
Well, he's off. We need to let him go because it's dinner time. It's dinner time on the super yacht that he's on, and there's some kind of themed banquet planned for them this evening, I believe. I'm not quite sure what the theme is. Well, what are you doing tonight, actually?
It's one of those. It's a weird, even though it's COVID restricted, so we have to do it from social distancing. But they have they put the food. It's like a self-service thing. It's fantastic, but all the food's on naked women. It's it's just crazy. So you have to like wear a mask and gloves. But I was trying to eat the food off this girl's chest, but like the mask was getting in the way, so I got chucked out. It was very complicated. I'm being an absolute idiot because I'm so hungry now that I don't drink. See, but when I'm hungry, it's as if I were drunk. So to say, I want to try and get work in the future somewhere. So can we? I love you guys, but
let's stop. Yeah. Let's stop. Let's let you go off and get some food. So thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks for listening and watching this week. It's been a good week. It's been fun looking ahead to these fights, and we'll find out what happens soon enough. If you're listening on iTunes and you can get up there and give us a rate and a review, that would be handy. And YouTube wise, if you can subscribe, that's always good for us too. And we will be back on Sunday at some point, myself and Matt, with a look back at the fights, just to cast our eye back over what did eventually happen. So take care, everybody. We'll see you again soon.